Hey guys, welcome to this week's Beginner Breakdown. I'm your host, Skullboy, and here at the Beginner Breakdown we try to teach people who have never played RTS games before the ropes. And in this Beginner Breakdown, since the episode before we talked about things that help you get into the mental state of playing an RTS game and things that you just really need to do before you play your first game, this episode will be focused on pretty much choosing what race you want to play by examining the units of each of the three races. And feel free to click the annotations to jump to whichever video you want to check out first. There's the Protoss, who are masters of very ancient, very advanced technology. All of their units are very high quality and very strong, but they are on the expensive side. Or you can check out the Zerg. The Zerg are basically throwaway units, mass up your units. You have very cheap, low quality units, but you make a lot of them and overwhelm the units in a very Zerg buggy fashion. Lastly, you can check out the Terrans. Terrans are the human race of this game. All of their units are ranged, making them very, very powerful at defending positions, and basically making them pretty cool because they're humans. So feel free to check out whichever video. Just click the annotations, like and subscribe if you find these videos useful. Drop a comment on what you want to see for the next video. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. The Protoss race is an alien race. Their units are generally very strong but very costly. So we're going to start with the units made out of the Gateway first. The Gateway is a very unique mechanic in that it can transform to a warp gate with the proper research. Now normally when you build a unit out of the Gateway, it takes time and it appears at the Gateway's foot. Well, with warp gate research, you can click on it and create a unit anywhere where you have pylon radius. Pylons generate power for your buildings and for your units. And you can build a unit anywhere you have pylon power, even if it's across the map. So we're going to start with the most basic unit of the Protoss army. This is called the Zealot. And Zealot costs 100 minerals, so it's a very cheap unit. It's melee combat, and it attacks twice whenever it hits. It's relatively fast, and when the charge research is upgraded, it will actually do a short burst of speed to the enemy units. So it charges that, and it rushes up and hits it. So very basic unit, very strong unit when massed in numbers versus certain compositions. It's mainly used as a meat shield with a slight amount of DPS, nothing too notable of it as it's the most basic unit in the Protoss army. Moving on to the next unit, it's called the Stalker. The Stalker is a ranged attack unit that does bonus damage versus armor units. It can be upgraded to have a blink ability, which allows it to blink up cliffs and down cliffs. So it's a very short range teleport that's very useful for maneuvering units, and they're very fragile and very weak units that have a lot of DPS, so think of them as the glass cannons of your army. You want them behind your Zealots, so that while the Zealots are getting pummeled, the Stalkers are doing damage. Moving on to another very basic unit of the Gateway army is the Sentry. The Sentry is a ranged caster unit that has very low hit points, is very fragile, but some of its abilities are the strongest. It can create a force field, which creates a block of immovable terrain, so the Stalker can't move out because of the force fields that are blocking it. It can, however, blink over them, so that's another use for Stalkers for subverting Sentry. Now, another thing the Sentry can do is activate its Guardian Shield, which creates a bubble around the units, around itself, and any units within the bubble take 2 less damage for ranged attacks, which may not sound like much, but in a game of StarCraft, that is the difference between losing a battle and winning a battle. Moving on to more advanced units within the Protoss army. There are Dark Templar and High Templar. Both are very advanced units and are along the same tech tree. Dark Templar do amazing damage at 60, which is, I believe, the most damaging unit in the game. It is a melee unit and it's a stealth unit. And stealth units, they are cloaked, as you can see, they're kind of transparent. and they can only be seen by certain detector units and certain detector structures, which makes them great for catching an opponent off guard. If they are not prepared for Dark Templar, they cannot see the Dark Templar, and therefore the Dark Templar can attack with impunity. There are the High Templar, which are a very fragile caster unit. They have no basic attack. However, when upgraded, they can use a very powerful ability called the Psionic Storm, which shreds any melee or any infantry unit that dares to get in its path. They also have feedback, which reduces the energy of enemy casters and deals damage equal to the amount of energy lost. Moving on, there's the Archon. This unit cannot be normally built. However, you take 2 Templar of any kind, so 2 High Templar, and they gain the option to Archon Warp. And they'll morph together into this very powerful frontline short-ranged unit. It does a massive amount of damage, peaking out at 47 versus biological units, which is a large range of units, and a very hefty 350 health. Now, Dark Templar and High Templar can morph. This is not seen very often because it's, for reasons that we'll get into later, it's not very effective, nor is it cost effective. And Archons are very large units and very powerful units, but they also cost a lot. So moving on to there, we will move to the Stargate Units. The Stargate Units are your flying units. They are very powerful air superiority units. These fast units are called the Phoenix, and they can only attack air units, and they do bonus damage versus light units. They're very fast, very agile, and they can attack while moving, something no other unit can. They also have an ability called the Graviton Beam. The Graviton Beam, you can pick up any unit, lifting it into the air, allowing other Phoenix to attack you. This also disables the unit for the duration of the ability. Very useful for picking off high-value targets such as High Templar and Immortals, which will be explained later. This is the Void Ray. It's a very costly assault air unit, and what it does is it does a mediocre amount of damage, but if it remains on target for long enough, its beam will increase and it will continue to do massive amounts of damage. Especially versus large targets. The larger the target is, the more damage it usually does. And last but not least, the capital ship of the Protoss fleet, the Carrier. The Carrier has no attacks of its own, yet each carrier carries about 8 interceptors which fly out and attack whatever the carrier chooses to assault. Very strong unit, very useful in circumstances, yet very, very expensive. Now moving on is the Robotics Units. The Robotics Units are your siege units, are your very strong ground units usually. This is the Immortal, and it is designed to be the siege breaker. It is designed to counter other armored and beefy siege units. Its hardened shields reduces incoming damage to a maximum of 10. So if it were to be hit for, let's say, 30 damage, its shields would reduce it to 10 damage. It also does a hefty 65 damage to armored units, which is most structures in the game, and a very large range of units. So it's a very powerful anti-armored, anti-tank unit. The transport for the Protoss army is called the Warp Prism. It's a very fragile yet very fast transport unit. It can pick units up and unload them. It also can take advantage of the warp gate mechanic and become a pylon power, or a power grid, allowing the warping of other Protoss units. Very useful for sneak attacks on the enemy. Moving on is the Observer, which is a very fragile scout unit that is one of the other stealth units in the game. So it can only be seen by a detector, which it is a detector in and of itself. And it's used to scout out the enemy and fly around and keep tabs on what the enemy is doing, since the enemy usually can't see it. The final unit for the robotics facility is the Colossus. The Colossus is a very large, very clunky, but very, very powerful late-game Protoss unit. As a splash attack, it creates a beam where it can hit multiple units. This makes it very powerful in an anti-infantry role. In fact, the Colossus is used in every single matchup and at pretty much every single stage in the game because of how powerful it is. It is the absolute powerhouse of the Protoss army, and you should be very careful when engaging a Colossus. The final and most important unit of the Protoss army is called the Mothership. The Mothership is the pride and joy of the Protoss fleet. It is so powerful that there can only be one Mothership per Protoss army. It's a flyer unit, and it has a very, very weak attack, but its power does not lie in its attack. Its power lies in its special ability. Notice these Zealots, how they appear opaque and they're perfectly fine. But notice as the Mothership gets closer to them, they begin to stealth and become transparent. Any unit underneath the Mothership or within its radius will become cloaked, and the enemy will require detection to be able to see any unit. So if you're able to destroy the enemy's detection, they effectively cannot see your army. Another very powerful aspect of the Mothership is its vortex ability, which creates a vortex on the ground where if any other unit enters, it gets sucked into the vortex and taken out of combat for 20 seconds. I'm going to move it up here so I can show you the next ability that the Mothership has. It is called Mass Recall, and when activated, it shows a massive reticle, and you move this reticle over your units, and it teleports those units to the Mothership. Very useful for getting your army out of a sticky situation or assaulting an enemy base unprepared. So this has been the basic Protoss overview. I have described all the units that are available to the Protoss army. And if you are looking for a race to play and you're interested in the Protoss army, keep in mind that they have very powerful units and very mobile units. But they are also very difficult to race to play because if you lose even one or two units, because they're so expensive and so powerful and so game-changing, that losing one or two units can cause you to lose a battle and eventually the game. So the Protoss are the most powerful race, yet the most expensive race to play. So this has been the Protoss section of the beginner breakdown. I am going to release 2 more videos describing the Zerg Units and the Terran Units. Thank you guys for watching. As always, check out Mobility Gaming. They're awesome. They're sponsoring me. Subscribe and like this video if you find it helpful. And please stay tuned for more beginner breakdown. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Zerg portion of this week's beginner breakdown. This will basically just go over all the units of the Zerg and talk about some of their very small fundamentals. The Zerg, they are very weak, low efficiency, low quality units, but they are incredibly cheap. They operate on the idea that my opponent's going to have better units than I am, but I'm going to have 50 more than he does, so I'll be able to win in a numbers game. This does mean that positioning your units correctly is very important, and making sure you don't fight into choke points. That is a big, big, big thing with playing with a Zerg army. So we're going to start with their ground units right now. These little fast dog-like things are called Zerglings. They have a very meager 35 health and a very weak 5 damage. They're melee, and as you can see, they're fairly fast. When you make one, they come out in pairs, so you spend minerals for 1 and you get 2. So they're really easy to mass up, really easy to get a lot of them, but they're incredibly weak. So they're mainly used early game and occasionally late game to run past the opponent's slower defenses and into their main to do economic damage. They can be upgraded into the Baneling, which is a slower Zergling. It's got less health, but it does a whopping 20 damage and 35 damage to the light. And the way they attack is they roll up to whatever they want to kill, they attack, and then they blow up, dealing splash damage. And we're going to stop these guys right here so they don't keep making that noise. Moving on from there, is the Roach. This is a heavy assault beast. It costs 2 supply to make, making it one of the more costly units in the game. Resource-wise, it's very cheap and one of the most efficient units that the Zerg players have. They can burrow, and when burrowed, they regenerate health really fast, and with the correct upgrade, they can move while burrowed, making them the Zerg's only real stealth unit. They are usually used early to mid game, and they're used to power your way through defenses. They're one of the few Zerg units that are relatively strong for their cost. Moving on is the Hydralisk, is pretty much the glass cannon of the Zerg. They do a whopping 12 damage at a very fast attack speed at 5 range, 6 if upgraded. They do much more damage than the Roach, but they are much squishier and much slower, making mistakes with them all the more costly. They're relatively expensive for most Zerg units, but they are well worth the cost provided you can keep them safe. This unit is called the Queen. It is a caster unit and is designed to be a support unit, mainly to help with your economy. If a unit gets damaged using energy, you can heal them pretty much back to full. It heals them for 125, which is pretty much most units' health bars. It also has Spawn Larva, which increases your economic production, and Spawn Creep Tumor, which creates this wonderful stuff called Creep. This purple gunk is creep, and all Zerg buildings have to be on creep or else they slowly start to die. Zerg units move much faster when they're on creep, which makes creep very useful for attacking and defending, since your units are very slow when not on creep. The Ultralisk is one of the strongest ground units in the game. It does 15 damage, 35 versus armored, and a wide arc splash area. If you look at its arms, the entire area is being damaged when it attacks. It's very tough, starting out with 1 base armor, 2 if you get its special upgrade, and then 6 if you get 3 more armor upgrades, making Zerglings do 0 damage to it. So it is very useful to bust through very heavy defensive lines with a lot of weak, very fast attacking but very low damaged units. So they're very powerful, very bulky, so you don't want too many of them in your army, but they are quite powerful. Another caster unit that the Zerg has is called the Infestor. The Infestor has a plethora of neat abilities, such as Neural Parasite, which allows you to take control of an enemy unit and use it for your own. Fungal Growth, which is a damaging spell that splashes and roots all enemies hit by it, and roots them in the area and does damage to them. Another thing that is cool about it is it can spawn free attacking units known as infested Terrans. They start as swarm eggs and then pop out as infested Marines. They do more base damage than normal Marines, but they're much slower, and they have a limited time. They have a limited amount of life, 30 seconds. At the end of 30 seconds, they will perish, and the threat of the Infestor will be nullified. 2 interesting aspects about the Zerg army is Overlords and Overseers. Overlords are their only transport, and they are used as supply. So, whereas Protoss has pylons and Terrans have supply depots, which are buildings, Zerg can make flying units to use as their supply. This has a bunch of benefits and a bunch of drawbacks, and once you get the right tech, you can upgrade them to Overseers, which are considerably faster and have 2 spells of their own. They can create a Changeling, which plops down this little ugly little blob, and when it sees an enemy unit, it will become that enemy. It will become a basic unit of the enemies, and the enemy won't be able to tell the difference. So you can get free scouting and blend it in with the enemy's army to see where the enemy's going. Contaminate is used on enemy structures, and it stops that structure from being able to do anything for 30 seconds. So it delays production of upgrades and units for 30 seconds if you're able to get a Contaminate on the building. These 2 units, the Overlord is a necessary unit within the Zerg composition basically, because if you don't have it, you can't make units. The Overseer is seen less often, maybe one or two within each army as a detector unit to watch out for cloaked and stealth units. Moving on is the flyer units for the Zerg. They have the Mutalisk, which is a very, very, very fragile flyer, but it is very fast and very good at picking off low health targets. Its attack is called a Clave Worm, and unfortunately I don't have any enemies to show you this. But whenever it attacks, its attack bounces to multiple targets, allowing it to take out several enemies at once. The Corruptor is a very heavily armored flyer that is very hard to kill. It starts with 2 armor and 200 health, and it is mainly, well, it is only an anti-air attacker. You can use Contaminate to target any unit and make it take 20% extra damage. So it's very useful for picking off flying units of high value, such as battle cruisers or even Colossus, since they can be attacked by air. Now the strongest unit in the Zerg arsenal is the Broodlord. It is a very slow unit that is created when you upgrade a Corruptor. It can only attack ground units, but it attacks in such a unique way. It throws little broodlings at whatever it's attacking, and the broodlings have a limited life of about 8 seconds, but they do 4 damage and they attack incredibly fast. As you can see, the broodlords just chew through whatever they attack. So if you have multiple broodlords, they will decimate whatever you are trying to attack. So this has basically been it for the Zerg units. The Zerg is a very powerful race and very, very strong if used correctly. In terms of beginners, I believe this is one of the harder races to just pick up and play. But if you do learn the secrets of the Zerg, you will be able to win a lot of games. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to check out the other 2 videos for Protoss and Terran. Leave a like if you find this useful. Subscribe to Mobility Gaming's channel. I'm out. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Terran portion of the beginner breakdown for this week. The Terrans are basically the human race within StarCraft. All of their units are ranged. They have no melee units. They're very squishy units usually that rely a lot on positioning and just controlling the map and knowing what your opponent's going to do and where they're going to attack so you can prepare your defenses. They're very easy race to just pick up and play. Very, very difficult to master at higher levels. And we're going to start with the biological units because the Terran army is kind of just weird. This is the Marine. It's your basic ranged fighty unit. It shoots everything. And it has the ability to use Stim Pack, which greatly increases its attack speed, its move speed, everything, at the cost of dealing 10 damage to it. So we're going to move him back up here. This is the Marauder. He's more expensive than the Marine, but he's still a very low tier unit. He does 10 damage, 20 damage to armored, and when upgraded, all of his attacks slow the enemies for a few seconds, making him very useful for chasing and very, very powerful anti-armor unit. He also has the Stim ability, greatly increasing his move speed and attack speed, and the Marine and the Marauder are 2 staple units of pretty much any Terran army. The Ghost is a specialist caster unit for the Terrans. They have many abilities. They have Snipe, which leads to a precise shot, dealing 25 damage, ignoring armor, 50 damage versus psionic units. So it's a very good caster, anti-caster unit. It also has EMP, which shows you this low radius. And then any unit hit by EMP loses all of its shields. So if you're Protoss, you lose actually 100 shields, and it removes all the energy of whatever unit you hit by it. So it's very strong as an anti-caster. It can also cloak, allowing him to go invisible. And the best, perhaps the funnest thing about the Ghost is the fact that he can call down the all-powerful nuclear strike. He paints a target on the enemy screen. You would see a little small blinking red dot, and you would hear nuclear launch detected. Well, if the Ghost is allowed to paint the target and sit there for long enough, then the might of the Terran army crashes down on the head of your poor unfortunate enemy. Nukes are very expensive, so they're not used until super late game most of the time, so you really aren't going to see nuke rushes. The Reaper, very fast skirmisher unit. It has a very cool ability allowing it to leap up cliff sides. As you can see, it's very fast, but very, very fragile, and it does a lot of damage to light armored units, but it also throws grenades at structures, dealing 30 damage. So if you get enough Reapers, you can tear down structures pretty fast, making them a very strong harassing unit. So whenever your opponent's army moves out, you send a few Reapers into the back, and you are able to deal a bunch of damage. The Medevac is the next unit, and it is a support flying unit. It has transport capabilities, allowing you to pick up ground units and drop them off wherever you please. The most important thing about the Medevac is that it can heal biological units. As you can see, it shoots a healing beam to heal whatever unit's being damaged. The heal isn't enough, but as you can see, it makes it almost impossible for the Marine to kill the Marauder. It is basically an essential unit in any biological composition and any basic infantry composition, since your units can't heal without a medevac, and that's a very important thing. Moving on to the mech. Most Terrans stick to either a biological composition or a mech composition, with a few variations in between. And the Hellions, very cheap, very fast, high damage unit. It does 21 damage versus light units, making it a very, very powerful anti-worker and anti-light unit vehicle. It can be upgraded. Normally it would have red flames, which makes its damage only at 15, but I upgraded it so it had blue flames, increasing the damage by quite a bit. Hellions are very fast, very strong anti-infantry units. The Siege Tank is the next unit on the list. It has a decently strong normal attack, but when upgraded, it can transform into the all-powerful Siege mode. It can't move while in this mode, but its range is increased to a whopping 13, and when it attacks, drops a massive siege or cannon shell onto whatever it hits, which also has splash damage and deals a whopping 55 damage to armored units and 38 to normal units, making it very strong at defending and holding positions. Now, the pride of a Terran meching army is the Thor. The Thor, aside from dancing like a total boss, is a very, very strong walker unit. It does 33 damage and it attacks twice per attack, so dealing a whopping 66 damage at one attack. As you can see, it almost half-healths siege tanks. It's anti-air. It's also a very strong anti-air unit, doing very well against the weak, clumped-up units like Mutalisks. It can be upgraded to use the 255mm strike cannon, which, after a short delay, locks down the unit and basically kills it. It deals 500 damage over 6 seconds, which is enough to kill basically any ground unit in the game. Moving on to the air unit, there's a very rare style of Terran known as Sky Terran that focuses heavily on air units. The Banshee unit is a very powerful harass unit, dealing 26 damage attack. As you can see, that is quite a bit, and it attacks at quite a fast rate. Not only does it do a lot of damage, it can also be upgraded to be invisible and turn into a stealth unit. While stealth, only detectors are able to see the Banshee, making it very valuable for harassing the enemy worker line. The Viking is an anti-air unit. They have a large 9 range and deal a decent amount of damage while being fairly cheap to make. It also has the added bonus of being able to switch into assault mode, making it an anti-ground unit. While it's not very strong in this role, it can add the extra DPS to an army that is losing to turn a fight around. The Raven is the Terran's Flying Caster Unit. Aside from being a detector that allows it to see cloaked units, it has several very useful abilities, such as the auto turret, which creates a stationary defense turret that has a timed life, albeit 240 seconds, which is massive. Also can make a point defense drone, which shoots down incoming enemy projectiles. And it can also use the Seeker missile, which releases a little missile that chases the enemy unit, and if it catches it, deals a massive amount of damage in a slash. All mechanical units, including air units, can be repaired by the Terran's worker units, making mech armies very easy to create and sustain, whereas biological armies are dependent on the medevac. The final unit in the Sky Terran arsenal is the pride of the Terran fleet, the battlecruiser. A heavily armored unit, starting out with a whopping 4 armor, which makes Marines deal half damage to it. With 3 upgrades, it can be upgraded to have 6 armor, which means Marines do 0 damage to it, since they start out with 6 attack, making it very hard to kill and a very powerful attacker. As you can see, it shoots incredibly fast, dealing a low damage. But when massed up, they deal a lot of damage. When upgraded, it also has the Yamato cannon. While not as strong as the 250mm strike cannon, after a short charge-up time, it unleashes basically a Kamehameha wave that destroys the unit that is hit. So this has been the Terran portion of this week's beginner breakdown. Basically, if you want to check out any of the other videos to learn about the other races' units, please click the annotations for Protoss and Zerg. If you guys like the video, please like and subscribe. I'll be coming out with these videos every Wednesday. And thank you guys for watching.